Welcome to TORAH Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Hebrew for Fun and Profit with Gavriel Sanders. Thank you, our dear More. More. There we go. How are you doing, my brother? It's so good to see you again.
It's a pleasure. It's more or less.
More or less. Nice little play on words there. Very cool. Very cool.
By the way, it's interesting that in English we say more or less.
Yes.
And in Hebrew we say it the opposite. We say less or more. We say pachot o yoter.
Oh, interesting.
So, pachot o yoter. So
cool.
Why it's that way? Well, everything's backwards with Hebrew. We know that, I guess. So even that had to be.
Cool.
So anyway, that's how you doing? You have some, as they used to say in my old life, you have some new digs. You have a new operation for yourself.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's here in my office, which is it's actually quite cozy. I didn't actually think we'd be able to pull it off, the space wise, because we've just got too much furniture everywhere. But it just sort of worked out really good. And it's like I was going to try to put the green screen back up, just so that the viewers able to feel like nothing's changed. But realistically, I kind of like the change. I kind of like seeing something besides a green screen all the time. And so I may leave this up for a while. And in fact, I may not even reintroduce the green screen again until we get into our new building. Maybe that'll be the tip over switch.
The transitional theme.
Yes. So that'll be cool. But then again, I'm not really sure. It's the lighting works good with it here. And I didn't realize it until my son was playing with one of my green bags from Subway. He was sitting in the chair while I was doing my stuff, and it's not even the right color green. But man, it keyed it in almost perfectly. I was like, wow, maybe the lighting in here for some reason is better or something. I was like, maybe we can. But
interesting.
Yeah, but I had some interesting comments about keeping it the way it is, so maybe we'll just leave it alone for a while. So that'll be cool. But
I'm very happy for you. So,
yeah,
well, listen,
you.
let's launch this. I want to be conscientious and conscious of everyone's time. I love doing this in real time with you, the flow.
Right.
But not everybody can sit around to the extent that we can, and we can talk about a dozen different things within a short space. So anyway, this is program 12 for April 30th, 2017. If you're watching this somewhere in the future, today is the 4th of ER, the Hebrew month of ER. We talked a lot about ER last week. The Hebrew month of 5777. I just 20-year gap there. We call this Taf Shin Ayin Zion, and if you do the math, you're really going to come up with 777.
Oh, interesting.
If you do it now, what we normally do is. Everybody knows that sometimes you see a letter hey representing 5 that's put right here. But for most people don't do that. They just know that, we're in what's known as the 5th millennium. And so they know it's 5757. We use the letter Dalet here to represent the number 4 over here. So that's how it gets written out. This is how I write it on the whiteboard when I walk into the classroom in the morning where I teach school. And I'm going to come back to the school-related thing in a minute. I just had to make one correction from last week because, as anybody who's speaking in a live setting knows, if you quote something without having it in front of you, there's a possibility you might misquote it. And I don't like to do that, especially with regard to sacred scripture with Tanakh. And so I'm not, I don't have a mental concordance to the extent that Rabbi Skobac and Rabbi Singer seem to. But I had mentioned this passage from Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 17. Ve'amarti bilvavecha kochi ve'otzem yadi asali et achayel hazeh. And this particular part that I misquoted was it says ve'amarta bilvavecha, and you shall say in your heart, Kochi va'otzem yadi. I said last week, Kochi va'yadi. What does this mean? That my might and my strength, as it were, and the might of my hand, asali et achayel hazeh, produced for me this valor, or this again, it uses a synonym for might. So I just want to make sure I said that correctly. Pardon the obsession. Let's move on. Okay. Today, I thought we'd work on going back to something we worked on previously, to go back and work on a psalm, which will give us the opportunity, one of the psukim one of the prakim of Tehillim. This one, in this case, is Kuf Lamed Gimel, 133. And we'll learn some both vocabulary and some grammar items in context, which I think is a great way to anchor it to relevance. And it's also one that a lot of people, especially if you're coming from the church world, this is one that you're very familiar with already. And now we can kind of transfer that familiarity to something you're not so familiar with, which is, of course, the Hebrew formatting of it. And then after we've gone over this, and I want to take you in a little geography, because there are a couple of geographical things that are mentioned in this short psalm as well. I have some nice pictures, a little background for you on this. Then we're going to go into what I call Dvarim Ktanim Shehem Gdolim, small things that are big things. And so let's go right to it. First of all, there is, as most people know, a series of 15 psalms that, starting with Psalm 120 and going through Psalm 134, called the Shirei HaMa'alot. The Shir HaMa'alot means a song, shir, of ascent. HaMa'alot, the ascents, in this case. And this one is LeDavid, to or for David. We're talking about David the king, as it says here. Hine matov uma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. And this is a song, by the way. A lot of people know this. We used to sing this, Hine matov uma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. And there are different melodies that have been spun off for this through the years, but this is one that many, many people know. And it's often translated this way: how good and how pleasant it is that brothers dwell together. Or as you and I learned it, when brethren dwell together in unity, at least a variation of the old King James, right? So the word hine means behold. It's also, if you've heard Isaiah says this, for example, hineni, behold, here am I, behold, here am I. Hine is one of those words that can mean here. So if I said to you, Eifo hasefer sheli, where's my book? You could say, hine, and point and say, in other words, behold, look over there, look here. So we have actually three different words in Hebrew that mean here. We have the word po, we have the word kan, when we have the word hine. But hine is more of a trying to get your attention kind of word, and it can be used mixed together with the word ma, which normally means what, to bring out something emphatic, like how good, to what, look at like an extent. So we have hine matov, how good, umanaim, how pleasant, shevet, which is an interesting use of this verb, because it really means like a participle. It means just, is sitting. It doesn't say to sit. It doesn't say are sitting. It just says sitting. Achim, brethren, brothers. Gam, also yachad, together. Furthermore, keshemen hatov al harosh, yored al hazakan, zkan aharon. So this little cuff here, we'll come back to that. Ke shemen, as shemen, or like shemen, like oil, the good oil. Al harosh, on the head. Yored al hazakan, it goes down onto the beard of Aaron. And you notice there's a little difference, a very subtle difference here between zakan and sgan aharon. This is something we'll talk about in the future, but just so we have a point of reference on this, this is what something in Hebrew grammar is called smichut, where you have one noun plus another noun, happens to be what's called in English a proper noun, in this case somebody's name, like Aaron as opposed to the priest or a priest. So skan aharon is a compound noun, so to speak, the beard of Aaron, as you see it translated down below. Military intelligence or hospital staff is another example of smichut in English, where we have two nouns coming together to create one concept that makes it distinct from something else. Going on, this oil we're talking about still, sheyored al pi midotav. That in English it says that comes down over the collar of his robe. Literally, it says, if we take it, just taking the words in their literal sense, that goes down upon the mouth of. Now, this word is rarely used for garment. We have other words that could have been used, like ma'il, which is like a tunic, but here it uses the word midotav. And there's a play on words in here, because midot, and we talked about this last week with respect to the month of Iyar, and specifically Iyar being a bridge month characterized by the letter Vav, the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which Vav is used as a connector. The word and connects between words, sentences, etc., just like in English, only it's affixed to the word, as we're going to see in a moment how that works. And so in the same way, during this time of Nisan, from the time of the second night of Pesach, through the entire month of Iyar, and into the early part of the month of Sivan, which is coming up after Iyar, we run into the 50-day trek or hike, if you will, journey through back to the wilderness to Har Sinai and the receiving of the Torah at what's known as the holiday of Shavuot, or what's mentioned in the not so New Testament as the Feast of Pentecost, okay, which means 50. So that's what it's result. So the word midot, what am I talking about here? This word midot not only means in this case his garment, but the word midah means measure. We talk a lot in Jewish life, especially ethics, about midah ke neged midah, one quality or character trait over against another. And so this idea of midah ke neged midah is there's an anointing, there's an oil that comes down in order to sort of lubricate a person's character growth. So that's kind of a hinted at subset or sub-interpretation of what's going on here. But literally here we're talking about an oil that comes down onto the beard of Aaron, comes over the collar, this says here, al pi midotav, the mouth of his robe. And then it says, Ketal Hermon, Shired al Haret Zion, as the dew of Hermon. And again, we have this is another case like we had over here, this smichut, the beard of Aaron, Skan Aaron. This is also a smichut. This is a noun, tal, dew. Proper noun here, Hermon, the name of the mountain in the north of Israel that also straddles part of Lebanon and part of Syria. Shired al Haret Zion. That's like the dew of Hermon, or Hermon as we say in English, that descends upon the mountains of Zion. Finally, Kisham, because there, Siva, commanded, Hashem, et ha-bracha, he commanded the blessing, Chaim ad ha'olam, life forever.
Nice.
So we're going to come back to this in a few minutes and look at some special parts of this which we've highlighted. So again, you can see it in context after we talk about the general concept a little bit. But I thought since we're talking about Mount Hermon, and I used to live very close to it, almost at the foot, what's known al Reches, the Hermon. This is in the north of Israel. This is the beautiful, beautiful Mount Hermon, which is known in Arabic, by the way, is called Jebel Sheikh. If you know the word sheikh or sheikh, it means not just like a leader of a village or something, but also means a grandfather. So this mountain is called the grandfather of the mountains because it's the tallest. It's always white, kind of like a hoary head.
Yeah.
Kital Hermon Shiored al Haret Zion. And I did, just for fun earlier today, I thought, how long would it take if you wanted to drive from the area near Mount Hermon? You can't actually get to this place where the top is because it's really in Lebanon and Syria. But a very close place you can get to it is up in the northern part of the Golan Heights. There's a Druze village, and I used to live like right here where you see the red dot, and right here. For about 2.5 years I lived in that area, Kibbutz Dan, Kibbutz Dafna. And there's a Druze village called Majd Shams, which means the Tower of the Sun in Arabic. And I used to go up there once in a while. I thought, well, how long would it take to go from there, let's say the dew of Hermon, that fell upon the mountains, let's call it, of Zion. And here's where Zion is, they call it the Old City. And so I went to Google, good old Mr. Google, which kind of messed up on this map before. It's calling it Palestine some years ago. That was a big thing. But it's basically, with the new road here, which is known as Kvish Shesh, it's 160 miles or 255 kilometers to Jerusalem. You could take and go along this route here. This is pretty much the new route that goes right along there along the edge of the Green Line. And it takes you approximately to get 3 hours and 20 minutes to make that drive. What's interesting is if you go this particular route, come down the Jordan Valley, it's shorter in terms of mileage, but it takes you longer in terms of time. And speaking of the Jordan Valley, I used to take this route many, many times down through the years when I lived in Israel. I don't know if I take it today, but here's Mount Hermon. This is a bit more of a three-dimensional kind of map.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
And so you can see this big, it's like, can you imagine God taking his thumb, if I can use that anthropomorphic analogy, and running it right down this valley? This is the Rift Valley that continues all the way down, going down exiting out by Eilat, down through the Gulf of Aqaba, down past the tip of the Sinai Peninsula, and culminating in Uganda and Kenya around Lake Victoria. This is known as the Rift Valley, or the Jordan Valley for here, but the Rift Valley goes on. This is the African tectonic plate, and this is the Arabian tectonic plate. And the action, the movement of these through the many years has created this particular valley, which is known as either Emek HaYarden. Emek means valley. Sometimes it's called Bikat HaYarden as well. Bika also means valley. And it's from the foot of Mount Hermon through the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, all the way down to the Dead Sea. So I thought that'd be interesting. Now, so what happens is, and this still happens to this day, oftentimes Mount Hermon, or Hermon, is covered with snow. And because of the heat in the Middle East and the breezes, so the moisture from that snow not only melts and comes down and feeds the aquifers that become the early part of the Jordan River, way up at the headwaters up here by Kibbutz Dan, Kibbutz Dafna, and others, like 4 different streams that come together in the very north of Israel, some originating here and some up here more in Lebanon. But then it comes down to the Sea of Galilee and continues. So, but also in the air, there's moisture that gets carried by the breezes from here down to, here's Jericho or Jericho. We'd have to go over to the left from where I am right now, and that's where Yerushalayim would be, just up the road here, up the hill, by about a half-hour drive. So just to give you a little visualization of that particular psalm, so you can see that there's some context to it. So also giving you some context, I mentioned Kibbutz Dan. I lived at this kibbutz for about, I think, a year, and then was next door to it in Kibbutz Dafna for another year and a half. And this, you can see a little bit of the snow up here in Hermon. Beautiful place. On Kibbutz Dan, there is a beautiful museum. And if anybody's going to Israel, then this is an off the beaten path recommendation I'm giving you. This is a place called Beit Usishkin. Menachem Usishkin was someone who, at the time of Baron Rothschild, was a big financier of the land of Israel purchases in the late 1800s. And so they gave this, affixed his name to this. He purchased a lot of tracts of land when it was just swamp up in the Galil, in the Galilee area, the Hula Valley, the northern valley above the Sea of Galilee. And this museum is a fantastic place. You can Google it, the Hula Valley Nature Museum or Beit Usishkin. This was right outside about 50 yards across from where I lived, and you can see Mount Hermon right through the arch here. Very, very pretty place. And this is a little wider picture of Beit Usishkin. Inside of Beit Usishkin, there are many what are called dioramas. There are taxidermy samples of fauna, and then there's flora from all around the area. It was a major area for training field guides, etc. And the founder of this was a friend of mine, and then the one who inherited it from his responsibility from him, Yossi Levari, well-known, famous tour guide of Israel. We were good friends. We all lived on this kibbutz. So just a little background there. Now, coming back to Psalm 133, I wanted to draw your attention really quickly to the colored letters here. Shir HaMa'alot LeDavid, Hene Matov Ma Naim, Keshemen Hatal Al Harosh, She Yored, Ketal, She Yored, again, Habracha, Ha'olam. So these are the little things, small things, that are really big things. As people have come to know, Hebrew is very economical. It can take 2, 3, 4, sometimes English words to equal one Hebrew word because it's so compact. And you know that from your studies of it. So we call them in English prepositions, which means preposition, positioned before. And we use those all the time. We use them unconsciously. We don't even think about them. So in Hebrew, they use a different designation, different definition of what we call a preposition. In Hebrew, it's called milat yachas. It's a word that shows a relationship between two things. And so that makes, to me, it makes a lot more sense. Whether it's to something, for something. Yeah, but doesn't it make a big difference if I say, I'm expecting a check for you, I'm expecting a check from you?
Right.
Yes, it does. It does make a big difference. And those are prepositions that do that, that give us that specificity. So when we come to this, I want to give everyone a quick and easy way to remember 7 key letters that are used on the front of a word that make a difference when it comes to the relationship between the words that is being talked about, okay? And so we can take the name Moshe, Kalev. Kalev is like, how would you say his name? Caleb, okay? So the Joshua and Caleb, remember them from the book of Joshua, etc.
Right.
So it's also Caleb went up to Hebron, when the 12 spies were sent to look out the land. And so he has a prominent place. He was given territory. Caleb was, or Kalev was, in that area. So notice the letters. Mem.
That's pretty cool.
Well, you know where I'm going with
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
so.
that's awesome.
So it's just an easy way to remember it. So mem and a shin and a hey and a vav and a kaf. Sometimes it's chaf. And a lamed and a beit. Sometimes it's veit. Each of these has its own sort of guidelines or rules for functioning. But first, just the big picture. Moshe, the Kalev. So if you kind of memorize those names, then we can take a look at kind of how they work on an individual basis.
Nice.
So if we take a mem, and this word milah means word, all right? So sometimes you say, well, I thought the word davar means word. Well, yes, it does in biblical Hebrew, primarily. In modern Hebrew, we use the word milah to say word. We say, well, doesn't that mean circumcision, like brit milah? Yes, let's not confuse the issue. Stick with it right now. Milah here means word. All right, so if I take the mem and I affix it to a word, it's going to mean from. If I take the letter shin here, sh plus a milah, it's going to mean that or which. And I'll give you examples of all these in a moment. Hey, which is known here as hey haidiah, which means the known. And this is something, by the way, in Isaiah chapter 7:14 that you have prominently that did not figure in the early Christian translations of this, both in the Greek and in the English and other versions, where we talk about ha alma, the virgin, where Matthew said a virgin in earlier versions. But hey plus a word means the. Vav plus a word means and. Ka plus a word means as or like, and we already saw that with ke tal, as the dew. L plus a word means to or for. B plus a word means in or on. And here are some examples of that. So I'll just read these out. Avi me Toronto, my father is from Toronto, or should be somebody's name named Avi. Avi me Toronto. Sarah me Oregon, state of Oregon. Okay. So you can see, you say, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Me Toronto, me Oregon. Actually, by the way, this should be me Toronto. It should be one dot. There's some rules on that. This is what happens when you go too fast before the show. So we'll go back and fix that. An example of shin, meaning that or which. We say this a couple times a day in our davening, in our prayers in the morning and in the afternoon. Actually say this 3 times a day, twice in the morning, once in the afternoon. Ashrei ha'am shehashem elokav. Happy is the people that Hashem is their God.
Nice.
In this case, it's his God, because here we do in a singular sense, but it really means happy. You can't translate it literally, but it means happy is the people whose God is the Lord. Most people are familiar with that verse from Psalm 144, I believe, at the end. This is right out of the first passage in the Sefer Bereshit, Genesis. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. Here we have the letter Hey. Ha-shamayim, the heavens. Ha-aretz, the earth. And of course, let's just take and stay on the same theme. Ha-shamayim ve'aretz. ha'aretz, corresponding to the and here. Here's
Now
the vav plus a word, and we actually have two of them here. We have a vav, v, and the.
Right.
But ha'aretz is, of course, land, and let's go for a little further.
Bereshit that's two, right? The bit there in the beginning.
Okay. So yes, this the beit here means in, and then reshit, like
The head of or whatever.
reshit chochma yirat Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of Hashem. Yes.
Okay.
So, and there's a whole discussion, by the way, as some of the commentators do, on why did the Torah begin with the letter beit and not the letter aleph?
Oh, yeah, right.
And that's a discussion in itself. No time for that now, but it's worth one coming back to.
Sure.
Or check with Rabbi Skobac or Rabbi Singer, and that's a very interesting discussion.
Okay.
I just want to kind of make sure we lay this foundation grammatically and keep everybody on the same page. V'haya ke'etz shatul al pal gemaim. This is from Psalm chapter 1. And it shall be like a tree, ke'etz, like a tree planted, shatul al pal gemaim, by the divisions of waters. When it comes to lamed, meaning 2 or 4, v'lakachti etchem, and I shall take you, li, to me, la'am, as a people, to a people, for a people. So this is Hashem speaking in the book of Exodus, and so it says through Moses, I will take you to me to be, or to me for a people. And this I put in here just because it's easy for a lot of people listening and reading and watching. Hu ba ledaber. So we have something in with all verbs called the infinitive form in English, which doesn't mean endless, by the way, but it means the state where it's to say, to speak, to go, to walk, to run. There's no gender attached to it. There's no number attached to it. It simply means to, and then put in the action word. Now, English, those are split, to, and then the other word. In Hebrew, the lamed is always affixed, or prefixed in this case, to some form of the root. Then sometimes, depending on which family of the verb it's in, there might be something that are called infixes. Okay, so Hebrew uses prefixes, suffixes at the end of a word, and then something called infixes, which give us pattern clues of where are we in the spectrum of action when it comes to describing the 7 different types of action that Hebrew verbs use. Not a discussion for this time, but that's kind of in the pipeline to get to. But so you can see here the example of this, and then one more. Vaychi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt, Mitzrayim, which means like the narrow places. There's more than one, but there's one other here that's a 2-letter combination that I wanted to put in here, which is the word kshe. It's really a reduction of a larger word, a 4-letter word, not that kind of 4-letter word, a 4-letter word called ka'asher. But this kshe plus a word means when. Kshe ani omer shalom, ata mevin. When I say shalom, you understand. Okay, so this little prefix here, kshe. But I could just as easily have said ka'asher ani omer shalom, ata mevin. So this is a quick overview of some of these little things that are really big things, and showing us the relationship between words within a sentence and how to properly kind of figure out what's going on. And so it's really easy. In fact, on this one here, I was teaching my students, my 9th grade students, a few weeks ago, how to go from the infinitive, ledaber, to speak, to the present tense, which is medaber, as you well know. Medaber. Ata medaber ivrit. And my students, was so funny, she said, but wait a minute, mem on the beginning of a word means from. So doesn't this mean from speak? So she had regularized that the mem had only one function.
Right.
And of course that's not the case. Mem has more than one function. And so sometimes it means from, and sometimes it's an indication to us that we're in the present tense with a verb based on the pattern. One of the beautiful things about Hebrew, as anyone who's studied it a little bit even knows, is it is a very consistent language as far as patterns. Yes, it has its irregularities. Sometimes a noun looks one way in the singular, and it'll use the feminine, ending instead of the masculine ending, or vice versa. Or you have words that look absolutely masculine, Evan, Avanim, stones,
Right.
but it's really Ha'evan Hazot.
The stone.
So there's a bunch of those different, but those are fairly finite and they can be learned in context. English has the same. I would not want to have to learn English, by the way. I used to teach it as a second language, both in Israel and here and in Saudi Arabia. I would not want to have to. I mean, just take the word get, right, and put a preposition on it. Get up, get in, get on, get around, get out.
Right.
And it's so, and even those all have different shades of meaning to them. So
right.
Hebrew's pretty consistent compared to that. So, you have any comment or question about what we've done so far?
No. I like the fact that you came up with the Moshe Kalev. That's pretty cool. Kalev.
I think Baruch, as we say, Baruch Sheganavti. It's that Ganavti means that I stole. I found it someplace. I don't know. I wish I could give credit to whom credit is due. I read it somewhere, and I thought that is profound. That's such an easy way to remember it. So once again, going back and looking at the psalm itself, let me just click the slide back. There we go. So here you can again see in the psalm itself where those are. By the way, I wanted to mention this one, for example. As I said, Vav means and, but here, look at the pronunciation of it. It's not V, it's U,
right.
Correct? Enemato umanaim. Now we'll come back to this probably next week because Vav transforms from a V to an U in very specific context. We might have talked about this once before. We talked about what are called the bump letters. I happen to be doing a test this week with my students, and I taught them that when Vav appears in front of a Beit, another Vav, a Mem, or a Pei, it becomes U. And that's if you happen to have a copy of the Psalms or the Sidur, the Hebrew prayer book, and start looking at certain popular sections like the section for Shema or the davening that we do for Shema Esrei, you'll see that a lot. Something else I wanted to mention, I know this is, so by the way, if you're out there and you speak Spanish, you'll be happy to know that there is an interlinear version of, how about if I put it the right way? Here's the price tag. There's an interlinear version of the Book of Psalms, which is put out by Art Scroll, and I'll just kind of bring that up. You tell me when it's close enough.
That's good right there. It's perfect.
Okay. So you can see both the Hebrew and in this case the Spanish.
Yep.
But this is the Schottenstein edition of the English version has been available for a long, long time, and definitely something to have. I know when I started learning Greek, I don't even want to count how many years ago it was. I would sit down with a Greek text, and even though I couldn't understand it, I would sit down and just start reading. And you did that with Hebrew, right?
Right. Yep.
And so from the multiple repetitions of doing that, your eye and your ear and your mouth start to coordinate and work together on the pronunciation and the sound, the articulation of the language. And that's an important thing to do. It's better if you give 5 minutes a day. 10 is better, but if you were to give as little as 5 minutes a day with consistency, that's far better than if you sat down for an hour a week. So I really recommend that you do that. Take the text. It's available online. Whatever the text is that you're working with, if you need something with nikudot, then do that. But even myself, having read Hebrew for many, many years, my speaking ability, my speaking and listening skills, very, very high. My reading skills, pretty good. My writing skills, okay, because these are it depends on how much you do it. And so to this day, I will sit down and just pick up a text and I'll just read to see, okay, where am I at? And I try to find texts that challenge my present ability to take me up to the next level. I'm going through a book right now of Israeli satire written by a columnist, Ephraim Kishon, for many, many years in Israel. He wrote for 30 years and did many different books. So just because that's my level, to be challenging myself to nuances and innuendo and tricky uses of words. So you got to find that for yourself and then just kind of keep bumping yourself up to the next level. We've talked about, let me just whip through this all again. Sorry to do this in real time. We talked about you being able to get this dictionary, which we've been recommending. Again, we have no financial stake in this. Just we think this is very, very helpful to you. And then, of course, you can request a PDF of today's content. If you go back through the previous sessions that we've done, you'll see at the very end, we also recommend that you listen at least 10 minutes a day to spoken Hebrew in some way. Whether it's radio interviews, we recommended a particular app that you can get for your smartphone or on your computer, and just sit and listen, whether it's listening to Kol Yisrael, the Israel Broadcasting Authority, or learning songs in Hebrew. I've harvested a number of different songs that have both the words in Hebrew, in English, and transliterated. We'll be presenting some more of those. We've done one of those already. Last thing I want to mention is that last week on Monday was Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. We had a pretty sobering program at the high school where I teach, and in the 11th period class, which was Modern Jewish History, I combined two sections of 12th graders, my group and another one, and brought in a friend of mine, Mr. Yisrael Katz, who, he must be 93, 94 by now, I think. The events he described were from 72 years ago, so I guess I could just simply do the math. Wow. He was 15 years old when he was in Auschwitz. His teen life was basically decimated. And the stories that he told were just so difficult to hear, of people who died right next to him. He was on the death march when the Nazis were moving the prisoners, starting out 12,000 of them, and then broke them into groups of 6,000, and people would fall and they would shoot them. And one of the most dramatic points was in front of these young ladies, 17, 18 years old. He undid his sleeve and he showed the number still visibly tattooed on his arm. And what blew my mind was that many of the young ladies in that room had never, you'd think all of them they had not seen an actual tattooed arm. And we call this generation, and this is true of anybody today that's watching, especially if you're younger than 25, you're the bridge generation. Because when these young ladies are his age today, the events that we marked last week will be almost 150 years in the past. Can you imagine? So these young ladies are witnesses to the witnesses that were there. And then this week, tomorrow, and the next day we have, remember, we're marking those who fell in Israel, Israel Remembrance Day, and then Israel Independence Day coming up. And then later on in May, we have the Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Unification Day, 69 years. And so a year from now, it's 50 years. So it's a lot of things that are going on that are coming up. We'll try and feature some things as we're able to, but tune into the themes, try to be conscious, pick up a few words here and there that relate to that. And that's basically it for today's show. I want to thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And if there's anything I can do personally to help you in your own quest to get this language of God, from your heart where it's burning with a fire of desire to acquire and aspire higher. That was a lot.
You got to be the king of puns, that's for sure. That's funny.
As they used to say down south, that old preacher boy, he's still inside of him. Yeah. So that's basically it. But please, you got the address on the screen to email. Let me know if there's something we can do to be helpful to you. William Hall, as always, a pleasure. Thank you for entrusting me with your audience. I'm getting them back to you in better shape.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you all for tuning in. And we'll look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week. Hashem willing. Take care. And take care of my dear friend, Gavriel Sanders. Shalom, shalom.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד איפוק זו העוצמה ויתור זו הגדולה השאיפה